The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not the comforting scent of turkey or cinnamon, not the warmth of holiday cooking. No, this was the cold, musty scent of a basement that hadn't been aired out in months. It clung to the concrete floor, settled into the folds of the old couch, pushed against the wall, and whispered something cruel as I stood there holding my plate. I'd spent the entire morning upstairs, basting the turkey, seasoning the stuffing, arranging appetizers on my daughter-in-law's overpriced charcuterie board. I'd worn my nicer blouse, the one with the lace trim, because holidays mattered to me. They always had. And now here I was, being gently nudged toward the staircase like a guest overstaying her welcome. "It's just for the kids," Sarah had said, not meeting my eyes. "The dining table's super crowded, and they kind of took over the seats." I nodded, smiled. Of course. What else was I supposed to do? Cause a scene. Start listing how many Thanksgivings I had hosted, how many years I'd spent decorating, cooking, making sure everything felt just right for everyone else. My son Michael had disappeared upstairs the second the turkey hit the table. I caught a glimpse of him whispering something to his wife before she looked toward me with a polite, forced smile. "We set up a nice little spot downstairs," she said. "Super cozy, super cozy." The basement, with the mismatched folding chairs and the old carpet we'd been meaning to throw out for years. A card table sat crooked in the center, already set with paper napkins and plastic cups. They hadn't even brought the good dishes down. Not that I was expecting silverware and crystal, but I'd spent half my life polishing that set. It hurt to know it was being used, just not by me. I descended the stairs slowly, one hand balancing the plate, the other tracing the chipped wood of the banister. The furnace clicked on with a mechanical groan as I reached the bottom. The overhead light buzzed faintly, casting everything in a flat, pale yellow. I took a seat at the lone chair that wasn't wobbly. Turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, all of it piping hot, all of it made with my hands. But the warmth didn't reach me. Above me, muffled laughter rose through the floorboards, the clinking of glasses. Someone said something about the gravy being perfect, and I recognized my own recipe in their praise. I imagined Thomas at the head of the table. Yes, Thomas, my ex-husband, who somehow still held court at these gatherings like he hadn't left me to figure everything out alone 15 years ago. He was always good at showing up for the applause and disappearing during the cleanup. I stared at the plate, feeling its weight in my lap. It wasn't just the food, it was the finality of it all. The years I'd spent making room for others, moving aside, sacrificing without question. It all led to this moment, eating alone in the basement while my family celebrated upstairs without me. I didn't need anyone to say it out loud. Their actions had made it perfectly clear I didn't belong at the main table anymore. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no slam doors, just quiet decisions made without me. I wasn't asked if I preferred to sit elsewhere. I wasn't invited to take a photo or share a toast. I was simply moved, like a coat rack, like something functional, but not sentimental. When Sarah popped her head down to ask if I needed anything more: water, a blanket, I smiled. "I'm fine, sweetie," I said. My voice sounded too calm. She lingered for half a second before disappearing again, clearly relieved. I ate slowly. Every bite was technically delicious, but it all tasted like ash. I wasn't angry. Not yet. It was something heavier. Sadness, maybe. Or resignation. A sinking realization that I had slipped out of view, little by little, until even the people closest to me no longer noticed the space I left behind. After dinner, I scraped my plate into the trash and washed it in the basement sink. The noise upstairs continued. Dessert, more wine, but games. Maybe. I didn't wait to be invited up. I didn't need another smile that didn't reach the eyes. Another sentence that began with "sorry, but." I gathered my coat from the rack near the door and slipped out without saying goodbye. The night air was sharp and clean. My apartment wasn't far, just a 20-minute drive, mostly through quiet residential streets. As I sat behind the wheel, I glanced at the rearview mirror. I looked normal, fine. Not like a woman who had just eaten Thanksgiving dinner next to a box of old VHS tapes. But that was the thing about quiet betrayals. They didn't leave bruises, just a feeling. A slow, cold understanding that crept into your chest and stayed there. At home, I kicked off my shoes, hung up my coat, and sat at the kitchen table. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my phone. I just sat there, staring at the refrigerator door. A magnet still held up a drawing Michael made when he was 5. A turkey traced from his little hand. I'd saved it through every move, every downsizing. It had once made me smile. Now it felt like a photograph of a ghost. I thought of calling someone an old friend, maybe. But what would I say? That my own children had put me in the basement like I was an old lamp they didn't know where to put. It sounded petty, overdramatic. Even though it wasn't. Even though it cut deeper than any cruel word ever could. Instead, I got up, made tea, and sat in the silence. I didn't cry. I just felt done. Something had broken open inside me, but it wasn't rage. It was clarity. The kind that comes after you stop making excuses for people and start listening to what they've been showing you all along. They didn't mean harm, but they also didn't see me. Not really. And that was the root of it. I wasn't angry, but I was done being small. The next morning, I woke up with a stiff back and a hollow feeling in my chest. Not sadness. Not quite. It was something colder. Older. The kind of ache that settles in when you've been carrying invisible weight for so long. You forget it's there until one day it finally shifts and you feel the bruise it left behind. I shuffled into the kitchen, boiled water for coffee, and stood in front of the window while it brewed. The sky was gray, thick with the kind of low clouds that make you feel like the world is pressing down a little too hard. My apartment looked the same as always. Plain, but clean. A space I had treated as temporary for over 10 years. Waiting, I suppose, for some unspoken shift, for the kids to need me more, for something to change. But now, after that Thanksgiving, I realized nothing would change unless I did. That basement chair hadn't just been uncomfortable, it had been honest. And maybe for the first time in years, I was finally ready to sit with that honesty. I had spent a lifetime making things easier for everyone else. Saying yes, biting my tongue, sacrificing holidays, savings, sleep. I wasn't a martyr. I never thought of myself that way. I was just a mother, a wife, then a divorcee, a grandmother, a helper, a cheerleader, a default babysitter, a background presence. But the basement made one thing clear. I wasn't part of their inner circle anymore. Not really. I was a convenience. And it was time I stopped waiting to be invited back in. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and clicked on my bank app. I stared at the numbers for a long time. They weren't great, but they weren't hopeless either. I'd done okay with what I'd had. Split finances after the divorce had been brutal. Thomas had kept the house for the kids, and I'd taken the smaller half of the savings so they could stay in their school district. I told myself it was the right thing to do. I still believe it was. But now that they were grown, living their own curated suburban lives, I couldn't help but wonder, would they have done the same for me? I clicked over to a budgeting spreadsheet I'd abandoned months ago. I started filling in numbers, rent, utilities, groceries. I slashed through streaming services, dining out, every indulgence that wasn't strictly necessary. It felt grim at first, but after an hour something shifted. It wasn't deprivation, it was preparation. I was carving out space. I was reclaiming something. Maybe not a home yet, not a future I could see clearly, but at least a direction. The next day, I called a financial advisor I found online. Her name was Eleanor. She had a kind voice, didn't rush me, didn't talk down to me. I told her I was exploring options, that I might want to own something someday, something small. She didn't laugh. She didn't question my age or my income. She just said, "Let's take a look." That alone felt like a revelation. Someone treating me like I still had agency, like I could build something instead of just fading into someone else's background. I started saying no to the kids, Not with anger, just with intention. When Sarah asked if I could watch the twins on short notice because her sitter canceled, I said, "I can't today. Sorry." And when Michael texted about needing help with party prep for his wife's birthday, I replied, "I've got plans." I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I just let it sit. They didn't push. Maybe they were surprised. Maybe they assumed I was busy with something important. I was. Me. At night I researched. Not real estate at first. Just options. How to build credit. What lenders looked for. What neighborhoods were trending but still affordable. What types of freelance work paid more than others. I signed up for proofreading gigs. The money was small, but steady. More importantly, it made me feel useful again. But this time for myself. I stopped telling the kids every detail of my life. Not out of spite, just to keep something for myself. When they called, I listened. I still cared. I still loved them. I hadn't changed, but I didn't contort myself to fit their schedules anymore, and I didn't wait for them to ask how I was doing. I'd stopped expecting them to notice. A few weeks after that basement Thanksgiving, I walked into a condo open house in the city, just to look. Just to see. It was nothing like the big house in the suburbs. It was older, smaller, but there were tall windows, a little balcony, and light pouring in from the east. It was quiet in a different way. Not the silence of being forgotten, but the stillness of a fresh start. I stood in the kitchen and pictured my own dishes in the cupboards. Just mine. No kids asking where something was. No ex-husband criticizing my spice rack. Just me, and the warmth of a space I could finally claim. I didn't make an offer. Not yet, but I went home and pulled up listings. I ran numbers. I emailed Eleanor. The dream had shifted. It wasn't about being included anymore. It wasn't about getting my seat back at the family table. That was about building my own table. Even if only one chair was set. Even if I was the only one who knew it was there. The thing about being invisible for so long is that when you finally start seeing yourself again, it's disorienting, liberating, terrifying. But it's also the first time in years that I felt alive. The apartment felt smaller after that. Not because the walls had changed, but because I started to notice things. The peeling paint on the baseboards, the way the floor dipped near the sink, the faint rattle in the bedroom window when the wind picked up. They weren't new, but suddenly, they weren't tolerable either. I had spent too long in temporary places. Too long telling myself it wasn't the right time to settle, to invest, to dream. But now every creak of that old floor reminded me of the basement chair, the one I hadn't chosen but accepted. I met with Eleanor again. We went over numbers, scenarios, interest rates. She asked me if I was sure. "You'll have to tighten things even more. It won't be easy." I smiled. "It's already not easy." She nodded. "Then let's make it yours." And so I began, quietly, methodically. I cut more from my budget. I took on extra freelance jobs. I sold off things I didn't need. An old mixer, a bookshelf, a box of winter coats that hadn't fit me in years. I kept my progress to myself, not because I was hiding it, but because I knew the moment I told my kids, it would become something else, something to be doubted, questioned, evaluated. "Are you sure that's wise, Mom? The city's expensive. Don't you think you're rushing into something?" They would mean well. That's what would make it worse. Sarah called one evening to ask if I could help with her daughter's school project. I told her I couldn't. I was tied up with work. It was true. I had 3 articles to proof and a virtual meeting with a broker. She sounded surprised. "Okay, well, maybe another time then." I could hear the question behind her voice. What could Mom possibly be doing that's more important than glue sticks and poster board? Michael was more subtle. He started checking in more often. "Just calling to see how you're doing," he'd say. "You seem kind of busy lately." I told him everything was fine. "Just working on a few things," I said. He didn't ask what. He didn't push, but I could feel it. The subtle pull of expectation, that I remain available, that I stay in place. I didn't Instead, I toured another condo. This one had a brick wall in the living room and a tiny Juliet balcony that overlooked a street market. The bedroom was barely big enough for a queen bed, but the light that poured through the window at noon made me catch my breath. I ran my fingers along the kitchen counter. It was real stone, cool smooth. It felt solid in a way nothing else in my life had for years. It wasn't perfect. The appliances were old. The bathroom had blue tile. I didn't love, but it felt possible. It felt like a beginning. I took photos. I stared at them every night. Eleanor ran the numbers. "You can do it," she said. "Barely, but you can." I thought of the basement, the creaking chair, the smell of maldu. And then I thought of this kitchen, this view, this moment. I called the agent. I said. My voice didn't even shake. When the paperwork came through, I read every line twice. I asked questions. I signed. My hands didn't tremble. They felt steady, strong. I didn't tell Sarah. I didn't tell Michael. I didn't tell Thomas. Not because I was keeping a secret, but because this wasn't theirs. It was mine. I packed in silence. A little at a time. I scheduled movers. I updated my address. I bought exactly one new thing, a set of wine glasses. Not because I drink much, but because I liked the idea of having something beautiful, something chosen. I moved on a Wednesday morning. No fanfare, no helpers, just a couple of guys I paid by the hour and a list I'd printed the night before. By noon, I was in. The place was empty, echoing. My bed was unmade. My bookshelf was still in pieces. But I stood in the middle of that sunlit room and smiled. Not big, not dramatic, just a small, quiet smile that felt real. That night, I ate dinner on the floor. Chinese takeout, a single glass of wine. No candles, no TV, just the hum of the city outside and the gentle creak of wood beneath me. And I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. I didn't call anyone. The silence wasn't lonely. It was mine. Days passed. I settled in. I unpacked books. I hung a few photos. I planted a basil pot on the windowsill. I found a bakery down the street that made the best sourdough I'd ever tasted. I started walking to the park. Every morning, the leaves had started to turn, and the paths smelled like wet earth and possibility. Eventually, Sarah called. "How's everything?" "You've been quiet." I smiled. "Everything's good." She hesitated. "You sound different." I shrugged, even though she couldn't see me. "Maybe I am." She didn't ask what I meant. She changed the subject. Michael texted. "Hey Mom, Thanksgiving plans?" I stared at the message for a long time. Because I had a plan. I just wasn't sure they were part of it. The leaves were almost gone by the time the Thanksgiving group chat came alive again. A string of messages popped up one evening while I was reading in bed. Sarah was first. "Who's doing what this year?" Michael followed with, "Assuming we're back at the house." Then came a picture of last year's table, full of laughter and food. The main table, the one upstairs. I wasn't in the picture, of course not. I had been downstairs, beside a dehumidifier and a stack of plastic storage bins. A familiar tightness crept into my chest. But this time, it didn't hurt the same way. It just clarified things. They still didn't know. They still thought I was orbiting them, that I was waiting for my assignment. Bring this, do that, show up here, sit there. They had no idea I'd already left that orbit, that I was no longer circling their gravity. Sarah texted me privately later. "Mom, you'll do your casserole, right?" I stared at the message. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Then I typed, "Actually, I'm hosting this year." I hit send before I could overthink it. Her reply came back so fast I could feel the panic in the ellipsis. "Hosting? At your place?" "Yes," I wrote. "Just a small thing. A few friends." The pause was longer this time. Michael called the next morning. "Hosting, Mom? Since when?" "Since when?" I heard the edge in his voice. Not anger. Something worse. Disapproval masked as concern. Since a while, I said. I didn't mention it before, because I wasn't sure, but it feels right. There was silence on his end. Then, so you're not coming to ours? I could almost hear him recalculating. Who would make the stuffing? Who would bring dessert? Who would help clean? No, I said softly. I'm not. Another silence. Then, all right, I guess. Just let us know if you change your mind. I wouldn't. The rest of the week was a blur of quiet preparation. I didn't go overboard. I didn't need to. This wasn't about proving anything. It was about reclaiming something. I bought a small turkey. I picked up fresh herbs and a new table runner. I invited Eleanor, a neighbor I'd gotten close to, an old friend I hadn't seen in years. 3 guests. That was all. People who had seen me, really seen me, and hadn't needed me to shrink. The night before Thanksgiving, I set the table slowly, carefully. I laid out the dishes I loved. I folded the napkins into soft triangles. I lit a candle and let it burn as I cooked. The smell of sage and roasted garlic filled the condo. The windows glowed with city lights. I felt calm, not nervous, not guilty, just present. My phone buzzed a few times. Sarah, you sure you don't want to swing by after dinner? Michael, I'm still saving you a plate, just in case. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. They'd made their decision last year. I was making mine now. Thanksgiving morning was quiet. I woke to the hum of the city below and the warmth of light pouring through the windows. No one called. No one needed anything. There were no last-minute errands, no passive-aggressive remarks about cranberry sauce. Just coffee, just music, just peace. As I basted the turkey, I remembered the year Sarah broke a glass centerpiece and cried because she thought I'd be mad. I wasn't. I cleaned it up and hugged her tight. I thought about Michael, 10 years old, carrying the mashed potatoes like they were crown jewels. I had loved those moments. I still did, but they weren't enough to hold me in place anymore. Guests arrived just before 4, coats off, wine in hand, laughter already in their voices. We ate slowly, talked about everything: work, books, music, travel. They asked questions. They listened. They saw me not as someone who'd always been there, but as someone who had arrived. Halfway through dessert, my phone buzzed. A photo from the family thread. The big table again. My empty seat visible at the edge of the frame. A caption, "Missing you, Mom." I looked at the image for a long moment. Then I set the phone down and poured another glass of wine. Because I wasn't missing. I was exactly where I needed to be. The days that followed were quieter than usual. I didn't mean to create distance. It just settled in on its own, like fog. Sarah didn't call right away. Michael didn't text again. Maybe they assumed I was still upset. Maybe they were waiting for me to reach out first, to apologize for choosing something different, for daring to opt out of the usual script. But I didn't. Not because I was angry, but because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty. On Saturday morning, Sarah finally called. Her voice was tight, polite. "Hey, just checking in. Everything all right?" I told her everything was fine. Better than fine. I didn't elaborate. She hesitated. "You didn't say anything about wanting to host. We could have worked something out." There it was. The suggestion that my silence had caused the problem. That it was my lack of communication, not their lack of consideration, that had shifted the ground beneath us. I didn't want to work something out, I said calmly. I wanted to do it my way. Just once. She didn't respond right away. I could hear dishes clinking in the background, kids laughing faintly, then a quiet, "You could have told us." I nearly said it, nearly told her about the chair, the cold floor, the way laughter upstairs had made my turkey taste like dust. But I didn't, because it wasn't about that night anymore. It was about everything, before and after. It was about the pattern, about years of being useful, dependable, invisible, and how it all became painfully clear in that one fluorescent lit room. "I needed this," I said instead. Michael didn't call. But the following week, I got a text from him. Hope your dinner went well. The kids missed you. No mention of the basement. No mention of the decision. Just a gentle tug back toward normal. But I wasn't going back. I typed. Thanks. It was lovely. Hope you all had a good time. No apology. No invitation to relive the old dynamics. Just a polite wall, tall and quiet. A few days later, an email from Thomas landed in my inbox. Subject line, hope you're okay. That alone made me laugh. Short, dry, the kind of laugh that escapes before you can stop it. Inside the email, his tone was what it always had been. Lightly dismissive, performatively concerned. Margaret, I heard you hosted your own dinner this year. I suppose that was unexpected. I imagine the kids were a little confused. Just wanted to check that all is well. All is well. I closed the email without replying. Let him wonder. Let them all wonder what it means when the person they assumed would always say yes suddenly doesn't show up. It was strange how quickly things began to shift after that. Not in dramatic ways. There were no blow-ups, no scenes, but in small, measurable changes. Fewer casual texts, shorter calls, invitations that came later or not at all. I knew what it was. They weren't angry. They were recalibrating, trying to figure out how to fit me back into the box I'd quietly stepped out of. But I didn't want back in. I didn't miss the scraps of attention, the default roles, the subtle expectation that I would fill in the blanks they left behind. I had filled in my own. The condo, once unfamiliar, now felt like a second skin. The floors creaked in familiar ways. The street below hummed with a rhythm I had learned to love. I had a favorite coffee shop, a neighbor who brought up my mail when I forgot, a local library branch where the librarian knew my name. And most importantly, I had space. Not just physical space, but emotional space, mental space. The kind of space that had been taken up for years by everyone else's needs, their schedules, their stories, their problems. Now that space was mine. I filled it with late-night reading, with crossword puzzles, with the thrill of cooking for one. I lit candles without waiting for a reason. I listened to music I liked, not what someone else tolerated. I took long walks in the morning just to feel the sun on my face. I spoke to people who saw me as a whole person, not a title. Mom, ex-helper. The family thread still buzzed with updates, photos, jokes, recipes. I didn't mute it. I just didn't participate much. Not out of bitterness. I just didn't feel like shouting into a room where no one had noticed I'd gone quiet until it inconvenienced them. I still loved them. That hadn't changed. I would still be there if they truly needed me. But not on autopilot. Not at the cost of myself. And they knew it now. That was the shift. I saw it in the tentative tones of their voices. In the way they asked if I was busy before assuming I'd be available. In the pause that came before. Could you? As if they now realized I might say no. That pause was everything. They hadn't apologized for the basement. They probably never would. Maybe they didn't even remember it the way I did. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I had drawn a line. Not in anger, but in quiet, firm dignity. And once drawn, I had not stepped back. There's something surreal about remembering the past once you finally stopped living in it. You see it differently. The good moments feel both sweeter and sadder. The hurt sharpens into detail. I used to think of myself as the center of our family, not in a proud way, but like a foundation. The thing everyone stood on. I was the one who remembered birthdays, organized holidays, kept the fridge stocked with everyone's favorite snack. I was the peacekeeper, the glue, the dependable one, the one who could be called last minute, who wouldn't say no, who never asked for much in return. But there's a cost to being the reliable one. You start to disappear into it. You stop being a person and start being a function. I see that now. When Thomas left, people told me I'd find myself again. I didn't. I found bills, repairs, solo parenting, silence. There was no great journey of self-discovery. There was just responsibility. layered over grief. I adjusted. I always adjusted. For Sarah, for Michael, for the sake of some future stability that, if I'm honest, never quite arrived. And now that the dust has long since settled, I realize I never lost myself. I gave myself away, piece by piece, and called it love, called it duty, and maybe it was. But at some point, I stopped being in the picture. Literally, I found old photos recently, ones I hadn't seen in years. Birthdays, vacations, holidays. I was always the one holding the camera. Always behind the scenes. Always just out of frame. I'm in the frame now. I take photos of my dinners, of my condo, when the light hits it just right, of myself in the mirror, sometimes. Not for vanity, for proof that I'm here, that I'm living. It's strange how quiet the world becomes when you stop doing what's expected of you. At first, it felt like a punishment. Then it felt like clarity. Because the people who only loved me for what I did, they grew quieter. And the ones who saw me, really saw me, leaned in closer. Eleanor, my financial advisor, still checks in. She doesn't treat me like a project. She treats me like a woman who made a hard choice and stuck to it. My neighbor, Ruth, stops by with muffins. She accidentally bakes too many of. We sit on my tiny balcony and talk about everything and nothing. The way the city lights twinkle at dusk. Whether it's going to snow this week, whether we were ever really appreciated in the ways we needed to be. We laugh a lot. The kind of laughter that doesn't require explanation. My freelance work picked up too. I'm not rich, not even close, but I'm stable, independent. I pay my bills. I buy my own groceries. I even splurged once on a small painting at a weekend art fair. It hangs above my desk now. Blues and golds, abstract. It reminds me of wind moving over water, of something shifting, but strong. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had never said no. If I had shown up again that second Thanksgiving, casserole in hand, smile on my face, ready to sit wherever they put me. I could have. It would have been easier, in some ways, less uncomfortable. No tension, no distance. But I would have stayed in that emotional basement forever, because it was never just about where I sat. It was about what they saw when they looked at me. And what I saw, when I looked at myself, they saw convenience, familiarity, the easy yes. I saw a woman who had forgotten how to ask herself what she wanted, who had forgotten how to want anything at all, until I remembered. And once I did, I couldn't go back. Not because I didn't love them. I still do. I always will. But love isn't supposed to make you small. It's not supposed to leave you alone, at a folding table, listening to laughter through the ceiling. It's not supposed to only flow in one direction. So I stopped standing in the hallway of their lives, waiting to be invited in. I opened my own door instead. And once I stepped through it, the world didn't end. It began. December crept in like it always did, with its slow hush of frost and holiday music leaking out of store windows. The streets below my condo sparkled with lights, trees and windows, paper snowflakes on coffee shop doors. Everything soft and glowing. The group chat pinged again. Christmas plans? Sarah asked. Michael's offering to host this year. Someone dropped a photo of last year's dessert table. A little too perfect. A little too curated. A minute later, Sarah messaged me privately. You're coming this year, right? The kids really want to see you. I sat with that message for a long time. The air around me was still. My condo was warm. The lights low. A candle flickered on the windowsill. On the table, a book lay open beside a half-empty cup of tea. It was quiet here. Not lonely, just peaceful. She hadn't said where I'd be sitting. She hadn't mentioned the basement. Maybe she assumed I'd forgotten, or forgiven, or both. I didn't reply right away. I took a walk instead. Down the block, past the bakery, through the park where I'd watched the leaves change and fall and disappear beneath the snow. I watched a little boy make snow angels while his mother filmed him from the sidewalk. I wondered if she knew yet how quickly they grow up, how easy it is to give and give until you don't recognize the woman in the mirror anymore. Back at home, I made myself dinner, a small roast. Green beans, the last of the sourdough I'd picked up that morning. I lit another candle just because I could. I set the table, just for me. No folding chairs, no paper napkins. No one making space by asking me to step aside. Later that night, I texted Sarah back. I'll stop by for a quick visit, but I won't be staying for dinner. I've got plans here. I didn't wait for the reply. The next day, it came. A simple, okay, the kids will be happy to see. No guilt, no argument, just, okay. And maybe that was growth for her too. Maybe they were starting to see it. That I wasn't theirs to schedule. That I had a life now. A place of my own. A table of my own. Christmas came. I visited briefly. Brought a tin of cookies I'd made the night before. Hugged my grandchildren. Watched them tear through wrapping paper with shrieks of joy. I smiled. I meant it. But I left before dinner. Michael offered to walk me out. He looked tired, older than I remembered. You sure you don't want to stay? He asked, standing awkwardly near the coat rack. I'm sure, I said. I have a warm meal waiting at home. He nodded, but didn't quite understand. Not yet. That was okay. Some things are better lived than explained. I walked out into the snow. The cold didn't bother me. Back at the condo, I peeled off my gloves, lit a candle, and sat down to eat. It was quiet. There were no photos being taken. No one called my name, but I wasn't in the basement. I was in my home, at my table, exactly where I chose to be. And that was more than enough.